Hey friends, welcome back to Bike TV. So some of you may know I've been in this bicycle game for a really long time, decades. Try not to really think about it actually. But way back in the day, I had owned a Specialized stump jumper that was this beautiful raspberry pink color, probably like a 1990 or a 1991 bike, full XT. It's kind of the coolest bike of the day, at least what I could afford back in those times. And I had that bike for a long time and went on lots of cool adventures with that bike. And I've been on the hunt for a replacement, basically the same bike for a really long time with no luck until yesterday. And the reason why I've been after a replacement for that bike is just purely nostalgia. I used to mountain bike race on that bike back in the early 90s, but really for me what it was all about was it was also the very first bike that I did a big bike tour on. And that bike tour was in Southern Ontario, and I rode from Brampton at my mom's house out to Sarnia, Ontario, to chase a girl, of course. And that ride was 260K, kind of one way. And I have fond memories of how awful that bike ride was in both directions. Ended up hurting my knee on the way home and had to hop the train back to Toronto just because I couldn't pedal anymore. But that bike and that bike tour really hooked me on bike touring, and I really wanted to try and find that bike again and maybe actually convert one into a new school retro packing bike. And so I found it. Though it isn't pink, that's okay. It looks like the person that restored this bike has done a really good job of doing their best to kind of keep it as period as possible. So after searching the internets for years and years looking for that bike again and never seeing it, yesterday I found this. And it is as close to the real deal of that pink Specialized that I've seen in maybe a decade of scouring the internets here in Alberta. And so what I'm going to do with this bike is covet it and treasure it and keep it forever, maybe. And really what I'm going to do with it is convert it from its current pretty stock, kind of almost exactly stock bike from back in the day. I'm going to minor conversion to make it more comfortable for me, but otherwise I'm going to keep it, all the stock components, and turn it into a little bit of a retro packing bike that I plan on doing some kind of fun, easy bike packing routes this summer. So let's have a look at it in its purchased form. And what I'm going to do next is convert it into a retro packing rig that's going to work for my needs and my comfort, and going to take it on an overnighter next week. So let's have a look. All right, so we'll start at the front here. We're looking at some original XT 7-speed shifters. The person that owned this bike had upgraded to newer XT parallel push style V-brakes, which were notorious for being very wiggly and very wobbly and sometimes making a mess of tire sidewalls. It's got tires on it that I think are going to do just fine, and it actually has the stock rims are on it as well. Looks like he changed out the bars to a little bit of a riser to make it more comfortable. Also added some very fine XT pedals, which I'm going to leave on there. Looks like the original Shimano crank is on there with some newer chain rings and stock rear derailleur. And he also upgraded the rear derailleur to match the vintage of those parallel push V brakes, but it's still 7-speed and the shifting works amazing. Paint is really good on it, but when we look at it, we can see that the handlebar scenario is so low compared to where the seat's going to be, though it won't be there, and that seat just has to go. So this is it in its stock form, and we're going to do a little swap-a-roo on some of those parts and make it a little bit more comfortable for Mr. Carter here and head out on an overnighter next week. So let's go. isn't that a thing of beauty, hey? I've had a chance to ride it for a few days now to work out some of the kinks and make sure that everything's working, and it feels really great. One thing that I noticed on the first ride home was that the seat post that was originally with the bike when I purchased it was the wrong size, and by the time I made it home, the seat post had slipped all the way down, and so I was pedaling with my knees and my teeth. Thank you, Joe at Joe's Garage. You were open on my way home and had a seat post and got me rolling. So many thanks to Joe down on the river. One other thing too is the person that had worked on this bike previous didn't tighten up the bottom bracket cups very well, and so on another ride I started to notice sort of like a thunk 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 as I was pedaling, and sure enough the bottom bracket cups were more or less just hand tightened in there. So been a little bit more diligent going over everything and making sure it's safe for an overnighter, and it feels pretty good. So I'm going to show you now some of the changes I made to the bike, so let's go have a look and dig in. So really common for bikes of this era, even in largest sizes, was the tiniest little head tube on planet Earth. The original stock setup that was on this bike had the handlebars being way too low, so I've achieved a much more comfortable handlebar setup with Velo Orange Cigne stem, and those bearded Minneapolis dudes handlebar. The terminal gives me a really comfortable cockpit. Feels pretty good out of the saddle too, with some ergon grips for a little bit of bling and some comfort. And so far it feels really great. Very happy with the positioning, and you can see relative to my saddle height, really where I want to be. Thankfully the drivetrain on this bike is in really good condition, good enough for me at this point, and so I haven't had to change anything. Pretty standard 3x7 with a woefully high low gear with that 28 in the back, but everything functions fine, so we just kept it stock. And kind of liking these XT pedals too. I've never owned a set of those, and those feel pretty good on the feet. So drivetrain's more or less stock from the bike that I picked up. But what's the point of upgrading one of these cool old bikes without adding a little bit of chi-chi bits? And so in this case I threw on some Paul's levers, made it up to Paul's cantis, which are so fun to set up actually. The lost art of cantilever setup, and they feel, you know, not great. They're certainly not very powerful compared to the brakes I've been used to, but they're going to function just great, and they look awesome. So I'm very happy with that little blue lugged component on my bike here. Feels pretty awesome. And let's also talk about these lovely braided housings from Velo Orange as well. They add a nice little touch. And the bike was kind of feeling sort of plain looking, so I found these salsa decals in our decal pile, so now I'm riding a red salsa, or at least pretend salsa. And then for the trip, I've added a wolf tooth strap on there with my pump and some tools and a wide foot leader cage where I can stick a Nalgene leader bottle in there, and Revelate's Designs Tangle frame pack, which will just stay on here all the time because it's a great spot for a water bottle and a lock and all that kind of stuff I'll use on my day-to-day riding. So every one of my bikes gets a lovely Brooks Cambium saddle, and in this case I had a nice special edition copper one in stock. And so beautiful Cambium on here. And finally out back installed Tubus's amazing Logo Evo, which probably my favorite rack and fits so many bikes. So it'll come off after I'm done this overnighter, but in this case here we are. And also had to do a little custom rigging on as far as the upper part of the rack attachments, because there's no fittings on the frame, as you can see. So we're good to go for the overnighter here. And so there it is, ready for action. All right, so let's head out to the mountains and get rigged up for our overnighter. pushing on my shifter for a lower gear and there isn't one. Getting up that first climb on the not very low gear wasn't too bad. So far, so good. Honestly, doesn't really feel much different than a few of the other bikepacking bikes I've ridden lately, which is pretty wonderful. But yeah, feels good. Yeah, come on, Stumpy. All right, so all packed up. Super nice night in the woods. Stumpy did great. There she is. Honestly, rode super fine for the trip that I was on. I know it's not a difficult route to get in here, but the point is you can ride almost anything out on this route. And I don't know if I'll take this one on overnighter again. We'll see. It was really fun to ride. I don't want to wreck it. I kind of want to keep this bike, and so yeah, we'll see what the next adventure brings. But one last shot of Stumpy before we start heading back out. The brakes are more of a suggestion of braking versus actual braking. Better find that granny. Whoa.
Be the only map here.
So yeah, the retro packing experience was pretty great. The bike worked amazing. Got no complaints at all, and to be honest with you, for the type of terrain that we rode, which was to say is pretty easy, that bike could do it all. It felt just great. Maybe needed some lower gearing, but when you're bike packing, if you're not off and pushing at some point, are you actually bike packing or are you actually retro packing? One last shot of the unit. I don't think I would change anything about it except the tires. Those are going to change, but the rest of it's going to stay the same. And I think I'm just going to ride it around town and kind of have it as a fun bike here and there. Might leave the rear rack on. But other than that, I'm not changing anything. This was awesome. You know, if you've got an older MTB, ATB in your garage that's not doing anything and you kind of think you might want to give it a second life, we're experts at that kind of stuff. So bring it in and happily try to make it more comfortable, maybe update it with a different cockpit or perhaps a newer drivetrain even. You can get some newer stuff. But otherwise, maybe a fresh set of tires, some new grips and some new cables and put some new life into that old bike of yours. So be sure to pop by when you get a chance. And thanks for coming along on my little retro packing excursion. Till next time.